Hello everybody and welcome to a new Detailed Diatribe where today I am joined by Red and we're talking about a little bit of Star Wars. We had some unfinished business off our last Detailed Diatribe.
The one pattern with the Detailed Diatribes thus far has been like, hang on, I've got more to say about this thing. This is also the first Detailed Diatribe, I think, where we have assigned negative homework, where I asked, hey, should I rewatch Revenge of the Sith for this? And you were like, it's probably better for my argument if you don't do that. So I have been forbidden from rewatching Revenge of the Sith. So I haven't seen it in years. Of course, I remember the whole thing, but like,
I went in and deactivated your Disney Plus account specifically to stop you from reading up.
I've been sabotaged. Execute Order 66.
Exactly. So today, what we are here for is redeeming Revenge of the Sith, the quest for the movie that exists in our head.
Oh, beautiful.
Because you might be thinking, Blue, what are you talking about? This movie is perfect. I wish that were so.
Yeah, hypothetical audience member who would say such a thing.
Younger me is asking this right now. Blue, how could you betray me like this? No.
You were the chosen one.
The general premise of this Detailed Diatribe is that last time we talked about Rogue One, talking about why, among other things, the Star Wars prequels did not necessarily fit the tone as intended. They didn't quite nail the assignment as George Lucas might have hoped. They were aiming for tragedy, the foundational calamity that gets the galaxy into such a state that Luke Skywalker has to show up and save it after Cassian Andor does all the hard work first.
Yeah, gets him 90% of the way to the finish line.
Yes, they aimed for that, but they landed in meme land instead. And we talked a little bit about this and why the viewing experience is a little choppy, a little jarring. Takes you out of the intended drama and tragedy, and you're just thinking, that was a weird dialogue. No one talks like that. Why did he say that?
Now hold on, this whole operation was your idea.
Exactly. I think there might be a lot of prequel memes that are going to get quoted in this Detailed Diatribe.
Well, I'd be more on my game if I was allowed to rewatch the movie before this. Instead of just kind of half remembered like the big name ones, you know, the top of the prequel meme subreddit ones.
Yes, but Red, this is actually really relevant because we're talking about how the good possible version of Episode 3 is the one that does not exist on the screen. It's the one that exists in our heads, and that's part of why I wanted you to go in as blind as possible for this one, because ultimately we are not the first to notice this, nor the first to wonder, gee, what if someone could do something about this? What if we had like a way to make this movie suck less?
Joining the ranks of movies that I say are better if you watch them with the sound off.
Truly, and George Lucas has said that he conceived of the Star Wars movies in the kind of genre of silent film, of opera, where the actual words being said don't matter. It's the visuals and the performances that you're here for. And that's a very, very kind of like highfalutin way to explain exactly what you said, Red, is that this movie is kind of better if you throw off the sound, but we'll get to something approximating that later on.
Good.
But of course, this movie is not completely terrible, not without merit, only a Sith deals in absolutes, and the problem is not the story concept. The kernel of story there was good. It was really all about the execution, he says, using an image of Anakin about to fucking slaughter a room full of children.
Oh yeah, that's what I call an execution.
Speaking of also not being executed, I will be using basically no footage in this Detailed Diatribe because Disney is ruthless with their IP, and I want this video to exist as much as I want my shins to exist, so I will not be poking the hornet's nest on this one.
Cowards. We just heeded Master Kenobi's warning, hiding in the far reaches of the galaxy to avoid getting sniped by clone troopers.
We're the proverbial media outer rim, away from the core systems, and exactly. The Disney
space.
Inquisitors.
Yeah, exactly.
So, clips or not, today we'll be taking a little media tour through several years of attempts, older and recent, professional, enthusiast, film and print, to try and make Revenge of the Sith work. None of them are perfect, of course. No media is, that goes without saying, but all of them will be instructive and interesting and worth understanding for what it brings to the conversation and can teach us about the media that we're trying to unpack here in general. And taken together, I think this is an invaluable case study in media reception, because there are few films that have hung in our brains, just like in the air, like a cloud above our minds, like Revenge of the Sith. No other Star Wars movie, I think, occupies this kind of presence in our brains, and I struggle to find another piece of popular media that's like haunting us this many years later. Almost 19 years, I think the number is.
Dang.
It's insane.
No, I remember when I first watched Revenge of the Sith, I was doing all the movies in release or not in release order, sorry, in internal chronological order, because episode 7 had just been announced and we were going to watch it that winter, and it's like, oh wow, I gotta brush up, do my homework, and I just remember being so shocked that like the first 20 minutes of Revenge of the Sith is like good. Especially, bear in mind, this was right on the heels of me watching episode 1 and 2, so my standards were low. But then I was like,
oh, this is better. Whoa.
Anakin doing good deeds? That's crazy. And then I was like, okay, it's sort of wobbling, but like, how are they going to beef it so badly that everyone talks about this movie being terrible? And lo and behold, they found a way. And I think that's part of why this movie like haunts us so much is like a movie that's bad, you'll be like, whatever, it's bad. Like you might put together a watch party because everyone's like, oh, let's watch Birdemic, let's watch The Room. And it's like, okay, it's a bad movie. I'm only going to have a certain amount of fun with it. And a movie that's really good, you're like, I got to hype myself up for this. Like, oh, I get to see Two Towers in theaters? Man, that's going to be like a transcendent experience. A movie that's partially good and partially bad, that's the kind of thing that haunts you, where you're like, I can see from the good bits that you had potential. There was greatness in you. You were the chosen one.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
exactly.
I'm excited to see this.
I think all these factors make it a perfect case study in media reception and how we, as viewers, as fans, or whatever we want to call ourselves, tinker with a movie in our heads for years and years and years, and it never lets us go. As good as Empire Strikes Back is universally beloved, it's like, okay, yeah, we can go years without really thinking about it too much, and then we come back to it, it's like, oh yeah, no, it's Empire Strikes Back. The movie's really good.
Still good.
But Revenge of the Sith, it's in your brain. It's insidious. It gnaws itself in there. Yeah. So anyway, as we are preparing to embark, this is where the fun begins.
I knew it. I saw the little thumbnail slide to the left, and I was like, I know what that's gonna be. I can't even read it at this scale, but I can sense its presence. A dark shadow looming on the forest.
So as we begin our tour, we will start with an unorthodox entry, which is Star Wars The Third Gather's Backstroke of the West, which is a bootleg Chinese translation of the movie, fed back into Google Translate and redubbed back into English. Translation is a pathway to many memes some consider to be unnatural. This movie is fucking hilarious. You can look up compilations of like the best clips in like 4 or 5 minutes on it online. It's really, really good because there's some things you can kind of like understand, like the schematic of like what the translation thinks the words mean, and then there's just some really funny lines. So there's one where Obi-Wan is trying to call R2 when they're in the invisible hand, and he says, R2, do you is f***ing, and it's like, what was that supposed to be in the original? But then, of course, we have game time started. Obi-Wan's the geography that I stands compares you superior. And Palpatine saying to Obi-Wan, you too careful, he is a big. And Obi-Wan says, Mr. Speaker, we are for the big, when he's really saying, you too be careful, he's a Sith Lord. Well, Sith Lords are a speciality. That translates to, Master Speaker, we are for the big. It's so funny. It's so stupid.
Correct me if
it's
I'm
the
wrong.
Apotheosis of dumbass memes.
Isn't this the origin of do not want?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. Because
the no
when
from Darth Vader turns into do not want. Yes.
Oh, amazing. Damn.
And the recording actors who they got to dub in these lines did their goddamn best. I have to give them that.
Freaking dream job right there. Like, hey, I want you to do your best Ewan McGregor impression while reading this barely comprehensible gibberish of English. And it's like, yes, thank you.
Yes, so this is, we're going to knock this one out of the way. This one doesn't really count, but it is important to understand that for a large portion of the audience, the thing that this movie does best is be unintentionally hilarious, and this leans into that to the maximum possible extent, which is the dialogue is dumb. Oh, I'll give you dumb f***ing dialogue. Let's go. Let's have a party. So, yes.
Oh, man. Incredible.
And then winding our way back to even before Episode 3 came out, we can go to the original 2003-2004 OG Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars, airing on Cartoon Network in between episodes of Jackie Chan Adventure. I watched it as it was airing. I was in the trenches, and it was a blast.
Oh.
This began in 2003 in November, finished in March 2005, a month and a half before Episode 3 came out, and it deepens the world of the prequels through fantastic 2D animation that only Genndy Tartakovsky can bring to the table. But what this does is it shows the scope and scale of a galactic conflict. This is multiple star systems, multiple different Jedi and different planets doing all kinds of stuff. It's a war. It was vicious. Some went down. A random Sith Lord showed up. Anakin threw her off a cliff. This Grievous guy showed up and started smushing people with his, like, Durasteel claws.
Oh, yeah.
It was insane. It was awesome.
It also had the benefit that, like all the best Genndy works, there's almost no dialogue. Like, there's some of the episodes do have talking, but like there's a whole episode that's completely silent, and it's just Mace Windu fighting an entire army of droids, and it slaps. And
he just punches them to death. He doesn't even have his lightsaber for most of it.
It's mostly just him using the Force in ways that you're not allowed to do in the movies.
Yeah.
It's like there are all those memes about like unethical wizard spells. It's like I cast mend butt crack. This is like Mace Windu using the Force for that, where it's like I'm just gonna pull every screw out of this droid at once, and it's just gonna fall into pieces. And it's like that feels like it's disallowed by the Space Geneva Conventions, my man. That feels like it shouldn't be permissible.
Well, after the Clone Wars started, Yoda kind of went through the legal mechanism to wipe away all the Geneva Conventions because War Crimes Mitch would never let a stupid rule get in the way of some ass kicking.
White phosphorus we must deploy.
Fun fact, Yoda's first name is canonically Minch. Now you know.
Yeah. But yeah, I remember like the fight with, I guess, did Ventress not have a name in this version? I feel like...
She was Ventress. I don't think she was ever addressed as such.
Right.
But
I mean, it's
remember,
clearly her.
like, yeah, I remember knowing like, oh, that's Asajj Ventress. They just didn't call her that. Maybe it said in the credits or something.
But yeah, I remember, like, this is a weird thing to be impressed by because it's very simple, but of course she's got red lightsabers and he's got a blue lightsaber, and the lighting of the scene is very much like she's lit red, he's lit blue, but then when he throws her off the cliff, he's also lit red because he's using her lightsaber, and it's like, oh no, Anakin, not the dark side. Again, it's simple, but it's effective. Like, there's a reason that sort of, like, color theory gets so much play in this sort of thing. And of course, Genndy just loves some complicated fight choreography, so it'd be like, yeah, let's let these space wizards go to town on each other. Let's let this droid with just way too many arms go to town on the, and Shaggy from Scooby-Doo and his friends.
Yeah, while doing a handstand and holding a lightsaber in his foot.
Yeah. Also, this is the show where the clone troopers are at their coolest and most competent, in large part because they don't talk. And this is like... Even considering the fact that they have an episode that's just like a mook horror show, and it is the Ventress one, where she just takes out the entire squad of troopers that are with Anakin. Yeah. They just get like dragged into the woods. So you'd think like, oh great, it's the Marines from Aliens. They're just here to be cannon fodder. But then like you get the full-blown war ones where they are just on it. They are literally just the machine of war made flesh. And this show actually makes you believe that in a way that the movies kind of don't. And even the 3D Clone Wars cartoon kind of doesn't, because they spend a lot more time humanizing the clones than they do just showing how badass they are.
There's I think it was like episode 2 or 3 is just called ARC Troopers, and it's them doing this like infiltration on the planet Munilist to go destroy a droid factory or whatever by the banking clan. They don't say a word to each other. They are just a seamless single organism of ass kicking that is working its way through this city. Yeah, it's great.
It's good.
2003 Clone Wars is amazing, and it was our first like little extra bit of, and like there are Legends novels and stuff like that, but like this was our first bit of like what's happening between episodes 2 and 3. All this shit.
Turning Genndy loose on Star Wars was a really smart decision. I think they should do it more. Just bring him back.
They should. They should. I know he's busy, but they should do it again. That was, of course, not the only Clone Wars media that we got, because in years following, we got the 3D Star Wars The Clone Wars, as featured on A Question of actually, which gave us time to really sit in the world. If the animated 2D was a shotgun blast, this is a very wide view where we get to just kind of like simmer in it and take the time to feel the presence of this world and what it's like and who's inhabiting it, what are the motivations. The opening crawl of episode 3 says there are heroes on both sides, evil is everywhere, and this show really takes the time to give us that. And it works. It is so beloved for a variety of reasons, because it shows us a variety of planets, perspectives, factions, people, conflicts within a faction, beyond just like, oh, it's the Jedi and the Sith. It's like, no, they're clones who have their own inner lives and things and how they interact with Jedi, where we get one of the best scenes where they're just saying, oh, we're clones, so we're meant to be expendable, and Plo Koon says, not to me. Like that kind of thing that we don't really get in the movies or anywhere else, that we have the time to really sit in and experience. It's a good war show. It really is.
Yeah.
And it used the setting to draw out the best from these characters. We get to see Anakin being truly heroic.
I was gonna say, because that was something that even the 2D Clone Wars didn't do very much of, because while it was incredible with the fight choreography and with a lot of the characterization that did not require dialogue, the 2D Clone Wars version of Anakin wasn't really at his best. He was very on brand for his portrayal in the movies. He was extremely whiny, except for that one time where he just ate bugs for 5 minutes and made Obi-Wan watch.
We didn't really get anything new from
No.
Anakin in the 2003 2D Clone Wars. We just got to see the Anakin that we knew from episodes 2 and episodes 3 more.
He was basically par for the course with Anakin. 3D Clone Wars seems like they went out of their way to be like, hey, we're gonna try and like actually delve into Anakin's head and explain how he can go from we can't do this, it's not the Jedi way, to, yeah, let's execute some children in the space of a 10-minute turnaround. Like, what kind of person has that switch in their head? And that was not something that Episode 2 did, because Episode 2 just could not resist foreshadowing at every turn, this guy's gonna turn into Darth Vader, so he just keeps doing bad things and crimes, and they keep blasting the Imperial March anytime he does anything mildly sinister. And, like, they never really let him do anything good for unselfish, heroic reasons. It's always like, I'm gonna rescue my girlfriend, I'm gonna rescue my mentor. It's like, yeah, okay, cool. Are you doing any good deeds? And then in Episode 3, they were like, yeah, he does some good deeds, but this is also the movie that gives us the immediate turnaround from, like, no, Master Windu, we can't execute this guy, to, all right, let's go execute some innocent children immediately. So what they do is they build up this really interesting characterization of Anakin that I feel like I've delved into in a trope talk, I can't remember which one now, where it's like what they establish is that this version of Anakin has really no, like, moral limits when it comes to doing things to protect the people he loves. Like, he will do anything to save the people he cares about. He doesn't care. He has no qualms against killing. He has no qualms against sacrificing himself. That's, like, the one consistent through line of his characterization. And the cool thing is, this draws a line that connects his characterization in Episode 3 to his characterization in Episode 6, where the one thing we see him do is like, oh, wait, Luke is on the list of people I care about. All right, I no longer care about my well-being or the Emperor or anything else. His entire inner conflict is just like, wait, but I care about the Emperor, sort of, but I care about my son more. Okay, cool. Time to activate hero mode. And, like, that's the characterization we see of Anakin in the 3D Clone Wars, where, like, he has his sinister moments, but, like, a lot of his best moments are actually heroic acts in a deeply unheroic way. Like, there's the one episode we keep bringing up where, like, Obi-Wan and his old girlfriend, who's a stringent pacifist, are, like, dealing with this guy who's like, I've got a detonator and I'll blow up the whole ship. And if you, Jedi Master, kill me, she'll know that you're a cold-blooded killer. And you can't kill me, madam, without violating your principles and your political figure. So if you do that, you'll be undercutting your entire point. So which of you will strike me down and brand themselves a cold-blooded killer? And then a lightsaber goes through his chest and Anakin catches the detonator. Anakin's like, what? He was gonna blow up the ship. Couldn't give less of a fuck. And it's like, that is the kind of character I could see being convinced to do horrible things to save the woman he loves. I actually buy that. And that's a hard thing to justify. But so 3D Clone Wars did a good job of, like, peppering in different episodes. Like, here's Anakin just being an uncritical good guy. Here's Anakin being very heroic. Here's Anakin sacrificing himself. Here's Anakin getting a little bit edgy, but, like, it's all for a good cause. So what happens when he gets tricked and the cause that he gets dedicated to isn't actually good? And throughout 3D Clone Wars, the cause isn't good. This whole thing is the war that's been orchestrated by Palpatine on both sides. He's already being manipulated to participate. And, like, there's this exploration, I don't remember if it gets highlighted in the Clone Wars, that, like, just by making the Jedi engage in warfare, making them go from peacekeepers and monks to generals in an army, fundamentally corrupts their purpose from the ground up. Like, Palpatine has already won as soon as he convinces the Jedi that they need to start sacrificing clones, which is why Plo Koon being like, you're not expendable to me, is like, Palpatine's doing his damnedest, but the Jedi are still fundamentally so profoundly good that he can only do so much, and after a certain point he just has to kill them all and get them out of his way. It's just a lot of, like, it has the bandwidth and the runtime to explore this to a level of depth that the movies couldn't do, and that the 2D Clone Wars little vignettes definitely didn't have enough time to do and weren't trying to do.
Yeah. They had 3 minutes an episode. They had to work their way up from 1 minute an episode.
I forgot they were so tiny.
And of course, also, I would be remiss to say, a lot of the episodes of the 3D Clone Wars show dumb as hell,
Yeah.
and we just kind of forget they existed.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's easy to compartmentalize out the episodes of a TV show where Jar Jar f***s, and just remember the Siege of Mandalore and Satine getting stabbed by Darth Maul because that was good television. So, again, we can't pretend like our faves are flawless here.
No.
Everything in this prequel mess is tainted to some degree, and that's
Yeah.
the game that we're playing.
We all just pretend that lightsaber loss didn't happen because it was dumb, and you know that one about the planet with the incarnations of the Force, and then they all die with no
the
seeming
Mortis.
effect on the Mortis,
Yeah.
no seeming effect on the universe at large. It's just it's whatever.
We just pretend we didn't see it, and that's the game. That's
Yeah.
the game. That's Star Wars. But of course, there is one season that is more relevant to the conversation than the other ones, and that is because there is the final season, which is where we see Order 66 happening in real time. From the perspective outside the Chancellor's office, we see particularly Ahsoka's point of view, which is the galaxy collapsing all around her in a single moment of flooding darkness, and you only realize what's happening after it's already over. And this is very gorgeously planted earlier in the 4-episode Siege of Mandalore arc, because this season was really 3 arcs together. There was the Bad Batch introduction, which was stealth pilot, classic Filoni. There was a 4-episode arc with the Martez sisters in the lower levels of Coruscant, which is whatever. But then we get the Siege of Mandalore, and it's really interesting to see what Ahsoka's doing on Mandalore with Maul and this and that and everything. And then it's like, hey, Obi-Wan, let me just call in to tell you what's up. And he's like, yeah, Dooku's dead. Cool. It's like, things are happening fast.
We have 2 hours, everybody. Yeah, and
yes.
this really takes advantage of the fact that in the original movie, the pacing is shockingly bad when it comes to the that turning point. Like, the whole thing is like Anakin's been a good dude all movie, and now suddenly he's evil, and it's like, yeah, whatever. But when we see it from the perspective of somebody who's not there, the fact that you have 10 minutes start to finish between Windu confronts Palpatine and the Jedi die. That's all the time you have. And you, the audience, are you're not quite getting all this in linear order. You're just seeing these guys are on a hologram call when we walk in, and they're talking about Master Kenobi and Skywalker are off doing this thing. And it's like, is that like a... Do they have a few more things to do before this starts happening? And and Ahsoka's
Can you side quest for a few minutes?
Yeah, maybe. And Ahsoka's minding her business on the bridge, and then she just starts getting a little force migraine. And it's already? Oh my God, really? It's already happening?
Yeah.
And that's the dramatic irony that we couldn't be getting if we, the audience, hadn't already seen episode 3 and didn't already know the context for this. But that's what they've been doing. They've been planning it the whole time. And even before this, it's happening, Maul is losing his mind because he knows, he knows Palpatine and Sidious are the same guy. He knows that this whole thing has been orchestrated by this powerful Sith Lord, and he is basically Cassandra screaming at these people we have to get out of here or we are all going to die. And Ahsoka's yeah, whatever, tell it to the judge. And it just... we, the audience, are I don't know, girl, I think maybe you should be listening to him this time.
Heartbreaking. Worst person you know makes a good point.
And they kind of they simultaneously keep the pacing very unpredictable, because before that we get a lot of episodes like the Siege of Mandalore, excellent choreography, very cool fight scenes, a lot of slow building tension, and then they pack up Maul in his little box and he's like, no, you fools, and it's yeah, whatever. And then it's so it's not this episode, when's it gonna happen, Chief? Because we know it's coming. And then when it does happen, so fast there's nothing anyone can do about it. So we have that slow build of tension, and then oops, it's already too late.
And this is made even better after the fact, a little bit of second order context making it better retroactively, where in the Tales of the Jedi miniseries that came out a year or two afterwards, we get to see an episode that's essentially dedicated to Anakin is giving Ahsoka even harder training than what is required of her against battle droids. He's like, you're going to train with the clones because they're better shots than the battle droids. They have a better tactical mind than the battle droids. So she is practicing essentially the exact maneuver that she will employ when she starts going down on the bridge of the Venator.
Yeah.
It's so cool to see this happening, and then eventually to get the lead up into the moment where she and Rex walk out into the hangar bay for what ends up being a very dramatic sequence, and yada yada yada. If you've seen it, you know what's up. But it is so good in this final 4 episode little mini movie, essentially, because it happens so fast. Everyone did their best, and it wasn't anywhere near enough, and that is horror movie construction right there. That works so well.
That's Hitchcock suspense. That's there's a bomb under the table.
Of course, then it happens so fast and everything goes to shit immediately. We then, in another little piece of Star Wars media, get to see the fallout of that tragedy.
Yeah.
And for better and worse, for drama and goofs, for good fight choreography and putting Leia in a trench coat, this show is the distilled essence of the prequels, and what worked about the prequels works here, specifically in the emotional drama, where we get to see the scars that remain across the galaxy, and particularly, more than on anyone else, the survivors of Order 66 who are still carrying that pain, and seeing that on Obi-Wan and his eventual growth out of that to become the character that we know he's supposed to be in Episode 4. We see the real tragic consequences that this had, not just like, oh, you know, we flip a switch and then we're in the dark times now, but what does it look like for the people who are trying to live their lives and pretend like they didn't live through the worst thing to happen in all of history. And I want to call out that the poster, I really like this poster a lot. It captures the pathos of the show, an Anakin-shaped chasm in Obi-Wan's heart.
Oh man, that's
this show
brutal.
is dumb as hell in a lot of places, but this visual right here gets it in a way that I find very compelling. So I liked the Kenobi show.
I also liked Kenobi, and the thing is, like, a lot of it was dumb, but I thought that, like, it's one of those things where the starting premise I wasn't a huge fan of. I was like, if there's any Jedi who I don't think should go through this, like, broken faith thing, I think it's Kenobi, literally the poster boy for the best Jedi. But choosing to do that as a writing decision, and then because, like, we, the audience, again, we're like, he's gonna be the Obi-Wan we know and love by the end of this. He has to be, because that's the purpose of this show. How he goes from, like, emotionally devastated, like there's no hope, to being like, there is a hope. He's right over there, living on that farm. A new hope, you could say. So, like, knowing that, because I was watching this as it came out week to week, and I was like, it's a little bit tedious seeing Obi-Wan not being able to use the Force. Like, I feel like I'm watching Logan again, where it's like this hero from my childhood is old and sad and can't use his powers anymore. I was like, no, I can't do this again. Actually, this is just Logan, but with the Force, isn't it? Even with the precocious little child. That does explain why it was pretty solid, actually.
Yeah. And it would have been better if it was more like Logan, because all of the Disney Plus shows, except for The Mandalorian, would probably have been better were they just movies. Like, Clone Wars works episodically. That show works as a TV show. This Disney Plus nonsense ain't doing it episode to episode.
Blue, no, your shins. Sorry. But no, yeah, you're right. And I think, but that's part of why it was so compelling, seeing him go from, like, sad, scared, hiding, successfully suppressing his urge to do good deeds, which is unthinkable for Obi-Wan, to, like, fighting Anakin with one of the strongest displays of the Force we've seen, and it's so cool. Like, there's so much good stuff. Also, this show makes Darth Vader fucking terrifying, and it's like in such a good way. Like, when that episode, I think it's episode 3, where Vader shows up and, like, kicks the fuck out of Obi-Wan and, like, drags him through the fire, I was like, oh, the petty bitch I know is still in there.
Absolutely. Yes. 100%.
It's bonkers.
And we get to see him like throw spaceships with his brain in episode, I think,
so
5.
Cool.
It is. This is good.
And it's kind of this reminder of this thing that I touched on in my Rogue One detailed diatribe, where, like, these guys break the power curve of the rest of the galaxy. Like, that's the entire point. Everybody else is like, we have to kind of do normal people. We have to worry about, like, food and water and, like, not getting shot at and stuff like that. And Obi-Wan, when he's, you know, not off his game, is like, I'm going to take this mountain and push it somewhere else. And Vader is like, oh, that's cute. An escape shuttle? Yeah, no, come back here right this instant. And it's just like, oh, okay.
Command Z.
And it's this important, like, undercurrent of the story, is that, like, yeah, this isn't just a fun space fantasy setting with wizards. Like, when you have a story that has wizards in it, the wizards are kind of gonna undercut everybody else when they're around. So the whole point of Palpatine's plan is that, like, a single Jedi can outmatch a Sith in fair combat. They have a better understanding of the Force. They're more in tune with it. Vader is terrifying, but he's all mixed up. And when Obi-Wan's got his shit together, he beats him every time. Up to and including, you, I'm gonna astral project now, you know, that kind of thing. The ultimate JK lol. And it's just, it really highlights, like, the world needed the Jedi so badly, because just one Jedi can do this. but only when he has it in him. And the main fallout of episode 3 is that for a while there, he doesn't have it in him. He's letting these bad things happen because he's too broken to believe that he can actually do anything about it. Yeah. That's the true magnitude of Palpatine's evil plan. And none of that comes through in the original trilogy, and none of it comes through in the prequel trilogy. And it really only comes through in Rogue One because everybody's just turning directly to the screen and being like, hope is a very important thing. It's important to hope for good things to be able to happen. A new hope, you could say. I'm just so yeah.
And this makes sense in the context of the last season of the Clone Wars, where if Obi-Wan did everything he could and it wasn't enough, you can understand why a character like that would think, well, I'm never going to try again because I gave it my best, and when it mattered, the one time it mattered, I couldn't do it. All right, I quit. Yep. I'm going to go and be sad in the desert.
All right, time to go have a meatpacking job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But there's something else we can talk about here. A little bit of kind of the Clone Wars, kind of not. A fan animation done in the style of the Clone Wars show called Battle of Heroes, which is a very, very sweet. It came out earlier this year. A love letter to the core conflict, the core like pathos of Episode 3, which is this conflict between Anakin and Obi-Wan, and the whole story expressed in this one moment of them fighting. It's a very crisp, clean construction for it. They take a deleted scene from an unaired episode in canceled seasons of the Clone Wars, where it's Obi-Wan and Anakin talking on the planet Utapau about how Ahsoka left the Order, and Anakin's like, oh, Master, it's not fair. Like, how would you feel if I disappointed you? Like, would you even be able to sleep at night? And Obi-Wan's like, not very well, I'd imagine. And then it cuts seamlessly into the battle itself, and they're doing all this stuff. And it's cool because they actually pull in some choreography from test footage of Hayden Christensen and the stunt coordinators. There's this one, like, he stabs out his lightsaber, drops it, and catches it with the other hand that was in a test battle that they never ended up using in the film. They put it in here because it's a really cool move. So it's a very fun little bit of animation work to pull a lot of these things in, not just from the movie as it was, but all the work that went into it that never got to see the light of day. And then it ends with the transformation into Darth Vader. It's very, very simple, really. It's very pure. It's a crisp expression of one idea, but it's the essence of Anakin's fall in one smooth, simple, 15-minute little tragedy here. And it's seeing these friends who think for a while that there is nothing that they could do to get on each other's bad side, or like they would be horrified to ever be anything other than the best friends ever.
Yep.
And then, of course, look at what happens. They're fighting each other on the lava planet.
Yeah. I remember when that dropped, I checked the comments, and there were a lot of people who were like, it's weirdly haunting seeing this in the Clone Wars style. Like, it sort of breaks down the partition between these two things, because in my head, episode 3 is still separate from this. The events of it are still kind of walled off in the haha funny meme dimension, where everyone is a goofy live action character, whereas Clone Wars is where they're hiding all the good writing and stuff. And then in this case, it's like, oh no, it's almost transgressive to see these versions of the characters that I care about go through this thing that I knew was gonna happen, but it's still different to see it play out like this.
In your mind, you can put a little wall around the animated Anakin and Obi-Wan and think, well, these two are always going to be best of friends. We never see them fight in the Clone Wars style. And then it's like, oh, no.
Yeah.
No, it still ends up happening no matter what.
Yeah, doomed by the narrative, baby.
Now, we need to talk about points of view, because each entry that we've discussed sees Episode 3 a little differently. They take a unique viewpoint or highlight a different aspect of it, and together they act as a little bit of a kaleidoscope for what the creator and the people who enjoys, any particular entry here sees as most valuable or most interesting to the core of what makes Episode 3 good. So, Backstroke of the West is meme overdrive. If you're here for the memes, there you go. 2003 Clone Wars is a shotgun blast of action. 3D Clone Wars is the joy of seeing everybody be a hero and the pain of seeing nobody be enough. The Kenobi show is about the lasting traumas of our favorite mentor and Padawan, and the Battle of Heroes is an homage to the whole story, the whole idea of the prequels, smushed into one little fight. So all of these take a different aspect because the creators saw something different that they wanted to highlight, something that spoke to them in particular. because Episode 3 is a very bloated, complicated movie where there's a lot of stuff going on and not enough time to really unpack all of it well. So there's a lot of story elements and ideas and characters that are ripe for exploration in these other projects. So it's cool to see how they don't all try to do the same thing again and again and again. Each of them does something different and can stand in conversation with the other ones. Maybe not so much Backstroke of the West, but at least the ones that are serious can stand in conversation and not try to invalidate each other, not say, oh, I'm the only one you need. They all exist together, and that's a larger conversation about media oversaturation and the Disney strategy, but looking at it generously, it is cool to see it in a way where all of these things can be true simultaneously, and we can appreciate all of them together.
Yeah.
It gives us more to enjoy.
Part of what makes Episode 3 stick in our heads so much, like I said before, is that it is a mix of, like, quite good stuff and, like, remarkably bad things. It's like, I've said this for ages and ages. I was a Hayden Christensen defender before it was cool, all right? He can do really solid visual acting. He can portray a lot with his face and body language, and I think that's incredibly underrated as a skill. It's just that the dialogue that they were giving him was real bad. Like, that's dialogue that makes fucking Samuel L. Jackson sound like he doesn't know what he's talking about, okay? It's not Hayden Christensen's fault that Anakin talks the most in the movies. And there's a lot of, like, really solid scenes in Episode 3 where you can, like, feel the inner turmoil going on with him, and it's all just being portrayed in how he visibly, like, acts. As soon as he starts talking, the illusion is spoiled. But that's kind of how the whole movie feels. Like, wow, there's something beautiful here. And it just did something that spoiled the illusion and reminded me I am watching a Star Wars movie that's not particularly well put together.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that it's inspired so many people to be like, here's how I think we could fix it. And it's like, okay, 2003 Clone Wars, strip out all the dialogue, just focus on the kick-ass fights. Let's f***ing go. It's great. And even then, it can't really do much with Anakin. It gives him a kick-ass fight, and it's like, remember, he's going to turn evil? Okay, great. All right, bye. And that's it. And then 3D Clone Wars was like, no, we can do this. We just need to delve into Anakin. We need to give him better voice actor and a better dialogue, and then let's just go. Let's let him be this character. Let's show what he can do, and let's highlight the episodic nature of war. Let's take some episodes to do battlefields. There's like just little minor things in the show. Like there's this consistent point where like Anakin has a serious bone to pick anytime they fight anybody who enslaves people. He's always just kind of like, okay, this guy in particular. We're burning this whole place to the ground, and it's like that makes a lot of sense. Doesn't really come up in the movies very much, but it's a solid thing to like give him this little like this berserk button. Kenobi show was like, we need to delve into Obi-Wan and let's let him be sad. Let's let him be sad and in pain and just focus on how miserable he is for a little while, so that when he climbs back out of it and becomes the mentor we know he'll be, it's a big heroic moment rather than a foregone conclusion. It's like, great, yes, add depth to him. Add depth to Owen and Beru, of all people. Like, I love that The show is worth it for me just for that. Battle of Heroes is like, let's take everything that worked about Clone Wars and translate everything that worked about the fight choreography of that stupidly overlong and needlessly unrealistic sword fight. Because, like, that's the thing is, like, it's so cool looking, but why are they in lava? Like, come on. Why would they? And there's a lot of little moments in the choreography in the prequels where it's like, all right, that looked cool. Would Obi-Wan have done that, though? Like, the guy who's like, oh, my apprentice, you're always running off and doing dumb things. Would he really fling himself headfirst out of a window, chasing a flying droid, and then get mad at Anakin for saving him with a flying car? I don't know. That feels a little bit weird. That feels like the choreography is taking precedent over the characterization. But the choreography is still cool, so...
Yeah, it's like, is that it's poetry, it rhymes, or is it weird writing?
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, there's comedy in a character being a hypocrite, but at the same time, it's like, was that intentional, or was that just we needed this cool bit of choreography, we rendered out this cool set piece, and a lot of those movies felt like, we rendered out this cool set piece, we can't just not use it. So, of course, Anakin needs to have a fight in a droid-making factory, and of course they need to have a fight on this small piece of equipment on a lava river that there is now. There's a lava river here. And, like, there's so many points in the fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin where I'm like, that felt characterization heavy. Like, there's one bit where, like, they're in a clash, and I don't remember exactly what it is. I think Anakin basically just grabs Obi-Wan and starts choking him and is, like, forcing down his lightsaber at the same time. And there's just so much hate on his face. And I was like, this is worth more than the entire rest of the choreography. This is the fight in microcosm. That's all I needed to see. I don't need to see them doing the pinwheeling move. It's cool, but I don't need it. And there's so much of Star Wars where it's like, it's cool, but I don't need it. And in fact, it kind of hurts the impact. And I think that's why all of these, different points of view filter out different things from it. And they're like, this works, throw that out. This works, throw that out. Let's focus on this, let's throw that out. And I don't know, I think that it's a really interesting highlight of what specifically makes this movie stick with people so much, even though it's, pound by pound, not the best movie. Like, certainly not the best Star Wars movie, but it is the one that sticks with people. Yeah, well, yeah. But that's why it sticks with people, because you're constantly kind of like discussing it in your own head of like, that was cool, or was it? Wait, hold on. Yeah.
It does not let go of your brain.
No, it doesn't.
For better and worse, it does not let go of your brain.
Rent free. Anyway.
Yeah. So, yes, all of these reflect the film as it was, and they are dealing with the film as it was given to them. But what if we get a little bit creative here? So let us jump back to 2005 and talk about the book.
Yeah.
Matthew Stover's 2005 novelization of Revenge of the Sith, based on the original screenplay by George Lucas, tells the story in the most viscerally heartbreaking way imaginable, and it is so goddamn fucking good beyond what it had any right to be.
Oh, yeah.
On paper, it's like, oh, what if the dialogue was better and the motivations actually made sense? That's allowed? What? But really, what we can do here with prose is where the film implies things or limply communicates them through dialogue, the book is able to illuminate with truly operatic level prose. The character depth that we get out of this is, I will say, I have not read a lot of like sci fantasy books or stuff like that, but the character depth that we get from this is S tier. Ideas and angles on Anakin and Obi-Wan especially that even in all my years of seeing Star Wars I would have never even thought of before reading the first like 3 pages of the book. It's like, oh, and then you go and go and go and we get even more depth over the course of the story. But it is a succession of tragedies where each character only realizes how f***ed they are once it is far too late for anyone to stop it. It is true dramatic irony to the max.
I want to highlight how we got introduced to this book, because it was me committing a party faux pas, because we were hanging out with friends and I spotted it on the bookshelf and I just took it off the shelf and started reading it because I was like, haha, a Star Wars novel. And then it was like really good and I got distracted.
Yeah, so you pulled out the book and read I'm going to switch to the next slide here, the opening line. The story happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It is already over. Nothing can be done to change it.
That immediately dropped the temperature in the room. Oh no, we're talking about meta-narrative doomed from the beginning Hades Town here? This is great.
Yeah, it's incredible, and it's such a simple twist on something that we take for granted, like, oh, a long time ago, galaxy far, far away, whatever. But to then take it a step further and say, it's over. Mm-hmm. It's already happened. You can't stop it. It's really, really compelling, and I want to take a little bit of time to read through some of this because the narration does more than I could do describing it. So permit me a little bit of narration. If I can't get movie footage in here, I'll read a page out of the book.
Please.
As they're describing the introduction to the battle over Coruscant, it has essentially a scene of all the people in the galaxy watching this invasion on the home planet, the capital planet, live with... narration continues, and so it is that these adults across the galaxy watch the HoloNet with ashes where their hearts should be. Ashes because they can't see 2 prismatic bursts of real space reversion far out beyond the planet's gravity well. Because they can't see a pair of starfighters crisply jettison hyperdrive rings and streak into the storm of separatist vulture droids with all guns blazing. A pair of starfighters. Jedi starfighters. Only 2. 2 is enough. 2 is enough because the adults are wrong and their younglings are right. Though this is the end of the Age of Heroes, it has saved its best for last.
Oh my god.
Damn!
Holy That's devastating.
It's really good. I like it a lot.
That's so cool.
And permit me one more. They talk about a really interesting angle on the cult of personality around Anakin and Obi-Wan. So they describe in the opening chapter before the starfighters show up, Anakin and Obi-Wan, Kenobi and Skywalker. From the beginning of the Clone Wars, the phrase Kenobi and Skywalker has become a single word. And then jumping to another section in a different chapter. Whether Obi-Wan's legendary cleverness might beat Anakin's raw power straight up, no rules, the subject of schoolyard fistfights, crush pool wriggle matches, and pod chamber stink wars across the Republic, which, by the way, stink wars has to be the new way we describe people talking shit about each other on the internet.
Oh, absolutely.
Pod chamber stink wars. The struggles always end somehow, with the combatants on both sides admitting it doesn't matter. Anakin and Obi-Wan would never fight each other. They couldn't. They're a team. They're the team. And both of them are sure they always will be.
No, it's not fair.
So this is what I mean about how very simple little snippets of prose, a paragraph here, a paragraph there, deepen the world in a way that the movie or any film media couldn't possibly do. It's the power of narration and prose that every other form of Star Wars media is essentially handicapped by, where we have to imply or show with physical acting or be subtle about. The book is able to be completely explicit, and that ends up being a very powerful weapon in its arsenal. Prose allows for a much wider and deeper look with some truly fascinating insights, and I'll kind of sprint through a few of them.
Hell yeah.
Anakin's fear is a fairly nebulous concept in the original Episode 3 movie, but in this, for the purposes of narration, it's characterized as the dragon, specifically the dragon of a dead star, where Anakin and Obi-Wan went on some assignment and saw the star that had like exploded, and the sight of even something as powerful as a star dying basically instilled existential fear in him, and that is always what's nagging at him in the back of his mind. So whenever they need to talk about Anakin's fear says this, they say like the dragon said this or what have you. So
it's genius.
It's really over the top. It's extra as hell, but it works.
Yep.
We also get more detail in the choreography, highlighting how insanely skilled Kenobi and Skywalker really are. So in the opening moments of the movie, we see them kind of flying around in their jets over the Battle of Coruscant on their way to the Invisible Hand, and it's kind of like fun and games, whatever, nothing too dramatic. They're just, some buzz droids, whatever, yada, yada, yada. But this goes into detail on how insane the maneuvers they're pulling off are, and how they're dealing with, buzz droids on their wings and tri-fighters behind them and vulture droids and this and that, and how good of pilots they both are. Kenobi being a really good pilot despite the fact that he hates flying, and Anakin just being naturally the best pilot in the galaxy.
Yeah.
So it's not only more drama in the scene itself, but it is in service of characterization in a way that we really don't get in the movie, where it just kind of looks like overly CGI'd fun and games.
Yeah.
So clever little bit of work there.
I was going to say, yeah, prose is deceptively good at making fight choreography extremely impactful. Like a classic example, the fight in The Princess Bride, the sword fight between Inigo and the Man in Black, is really good. It's one of the best sword fights put to film. It is also one of the best sword fights put to page. And I read through it and I was surprised, because it's got this sort of like, it almost feels like cheating. Because it'll be like, oh, he used the yada yada defense, so he countered with the blah blah blah, and but finding himself matched, he moved on to the much more risky yada yada, and I'm like, wow, he had to use the yada yada? That's crazy. But like, it legitimately you don't necessarily visualize it, because you don't know what these things look like, because they're not real, I think. Don't come for me, sword fighting people. I am but a humble peasant who is only unskilled in the skills of sword fighting. When they translate that to film, they have to do so much work to make it look real, and then at the same time they have to do more work to make it look not effortless, because the problem with the way that the dogfight looks in the beginning of Episode 3, it looks like casual CGI fight stuff. The characters don't look particularly worried, even when it's like, oh no, this one's on Obi-Wan's tail, don't worry, Anakin's got it. It's like, yeah, good job, Anakin. But we don't really have the context to understand, like, oh, that was a tricky maneuver, or oh wow, that was really risky, or like, oh man, they don't have the ability to deal with that, they need to like improvise something. Whereas in prose, you can just have the character notice, like, I don't have a way to deal with this, I'll have to think of something. Okay, let's try this. Oh, phew, it worked. Like, whereas in the movie, they just do it completely expressionless the whole time. It's one of the complicated things about translating from one art form to another. Prose is unparalleled at getting in a character's head and seamlessly providing the audience information from there. And it can be used to add tension to a scene simply because the character knows that tension is there. Whereas in a movie, you have to show, don't tell that.
And this is also a really great window specifically for Star Wars into what the Force is like.
Ooh.
Because in the process of this dogfight, I think it's either Anakin or Obi-Wan who is about to do a maneuver, and instead of describing it in detail, it basically says, pictures what it would be like having pulled off this maneuver and where his starfighter is supposed to end up.
Ooh.
And he sees him doing it successfully in his mind, and the Force guides his hands to make that real.
Wow.
It's like he imagines the painting and then the Force, you know, moves the brush for him. There are a handful of things like that, including actually a really interesting bit of prose description from Dooku in the fight against them, where we see that with Dooku's powers of the dark side, he can see what each person's Force aura looks like, essentially. So Obi-Wan is a calm, tranquil meadow in the Force. He is perfectly zen.
In his lane, crops flourishing.
Exactly. Immense power, but in a calm, kind of cultivated way. Anakin is a swirling storm of smoke and lightning, and what is most dramatic of all is Palpatine is a well of pure blackness and shadow. He is an event horizon in the Force, as described by Dooku. And this is something we could never possibly get in film. And here it is effortlessly rendered on the page. It is not invalidating the movie, but it does so many things that the film couldn't hope to do. And it is so fascinating to see this play out as both a kind of companion piece to the movie and in some ways standing on its own. Because, for instance, in the sequence where Count Dooku's about to get absolutely got, we see this little look that he gives the camera, and it's like, okay, you know, he's shocked. I bet he didn't expect to die that day. But the book is able to go into a lot of detail about the plan that Sidious and Dooku had for this fight, where Dooku thinks he's just going to get captured, and then they're going to turn Anakin to the dark side, and he's going to get freed, and then they're going to do this, and Grand Army of the Sith and whatever. But famous little passage that's made the rounds online a handful of times is how this single look becomes a defining character moment for Dooku's entire story. As he looks up into the eyes of Anakin Skywalker for the final time, Count Dooku knows that he has been deceived not just today, but for many, many years. That he has never been the true apprentice. That he has never been the heir to the power of the Sith. He has only been a tool. His whole life, all his victories, all his struggles, all his heritage, everything he owns, everything he's been, all his dreams and grand vision for the future empire and the army of Sith have only been a pathetic sham, because all of them, all of him, add up only to this. He has existed only for this. This, to be the victim of Anakin Skywalker's first cold-blooded murder, first, but not, he knows, the last. Then the blades crossed at his throat, uncrossed like scissors. Snip. It does say snip, that's a little goofy. And all of him becomes nothing at all.
Damn.
That one little nothing moment, like very quick little look, becomes this catastrophic moment of realization as he's like, I see now that I am screwed. Entirely too late to stop it. And not only have I been screwed for the last, 5 minutes, I've been screwed my entire life.
I love
And it was
this.
just a matter of time until it happened.
What I especially love about this is that this is just a very quick little unspooling of character realizes he's about to be fridged for somebody else's character development.
Yeah.
More 11. And legitimately, that sort of existential horror of my entire life doesn't matter. I'm just being used for this moment. My death used to shape this character. Damn, that really do be how it works though. And it's rare that you get something that actually gets inside that character's head, since the whole thing about fridging is that it's unceremonious and usually completely external to the character. They're just being used for somebody else's development. But giving Dooku that moment of realization as he figures out his place in the story, and he doesn't like it, but it's far too late for him to do anything about it. Hey, look, theme of the book.
Yeah. And one interesting thing that happens after this is Obi-Wan gets knocked unconscious in the fight. What was supposed to happen was Dooku kills Obi-Wan and then gets taken prisoner by Anakin. So, of course, when Obi-Wan ends the fight not dead, Palpatine's like, Anakin, leave him. We have to go. He'll never make it. And Anakin's like, no, his fate will be the same as ours. And Palpatine says, I can make that an order. And Anakin says, no, you can't. The Jedi Council is under the authority of the Senate, and you do not control the Senate. And Palpatine says that may change, and Anakin says maybe it should, but for now I am not taking an order from you, sir. Sorry, I'm taking Obi-Wan with me, let's go. This actually becomes a fascinating little detail that is expanded on later on, because of course, we sense a plot to destroy the Jedi, yada yada yada, but there is actually a lot more about the political conspiracy against the Republic and the Jedi from Palpatine's perspective, from the Senate's perspective, and the Council's perspective. There's a deleted scene where basically Mon Mothma and Bail and Padme and some of the leaders of what will be the rebellion are meeting up in Coruscant as it's going down, and it got deleted, but it's
of course.
It's here. We see those conversations happening, and we get to see the slow building dread as everyone realizes once again they've just played into Sidious's trap. So the thing about the authority of the Chancellor over the Jedi Council being mitigated by the Senate, there's a whole political action going on where the Senate granting more emergency powers to the Supreme Chancellor will give Chancellor Palpatine Palpatine direct authority over the Jedi Council, which theoretically includes the possibility of disbanding the Council. And there's the scene where Yoda and Mace Windu and Obi-Wan are talking about this, and Mace Windu's like, this is bad. Do we not see that this is bad? And Yoda's like, not a problem it is. Serve the Force before the Republic we have, and continue afterwards we will. And Kenobi's like, not fucking helping Yoda.
No.
Like, if the Republic explodes, that's a bad thing. So we get to see these conversations and see which characters are figuring it out, which characters are realizing that a bad thing can happen, and which characters, little war crimes Minch over here, is not being helpful.
I feel like Yoda's problem, it's the same thing as like the Heimerdinger problem. Oh, he's 900 years old. He doesn't give a fuck. This is a blink in his eye. He cannot conceive of the world changing so precipitously in such a short span of time. No, I don't know. That's so funny. But I do remember when you brought this up, it was really like, if Palpatine's the Sith Lord, we've already lost. And it's like, yeah, buddy. Yeah.
They don't actually quite suspect it that way, because they're like, we know that the Sith is in control of the Senate, so maybe it's a member of Palpatine's staff, maybe it's the Speaker of the Senate, maybe it's someone in the Red Guards. We should interrogate Palpatine and his staff to figure out what's up. And they're like, oh, but Palpatine doesn't even think the Sith exist. I mean, what's our proof? And Obi-Wan's like, well, there was the Sith Lord on Naboo. And Mace Windu's like, I mean, yeah, he died. That's not the proof we need. It's like, we don't actually have anything. And they realize they can't really interrogate Palpatine because he already rules the galaxy. And it's cool because it adds up to this being the version of the story where the politics actually do matter and contribute even more drama to the fall of the Jedi and the fall of the Republic. There's so much politics in the prequels, and this book actually makes it fit.
Yeah, I've been told, possibly by you, that the politics in the prequels is legitimately like very important, and like the thing
in concept.
Yeah, and the thing that Lucas wanted to explore with it is like, how does a republic become a dictatorship? Which is a pertinent thing to unpack, you know, for reasons. And the thing is, in practice, it's like episode 1's all about trade disputes. Who gives a f about trade disputes? Everybody likes episode 1 because of the kick-ass fight with Darth Maul. And it's like, yeah, the trade disputes feel like a distraction from the plot. But unfortunately, they are the plot, and the fight with Maul is the distraction. Yeah. The fight with Maul is just proof that all this important trade dispute stuff is going on because of an evil wizard. Cool. And then, like, episode 2, Obi-Wan unraveling the conspiracy of the Clone Wars, but not quite far enough. And then the distraction is throw in a gladiatorial combat fight, give us some pit fight, and also a fight in a droid manufacturing facility. Let's go. And then episode 3, it's like, politics, the Senate, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to peacefully vote that we give supreme power to Palpatine forever. Sure. And you, like, when Padme says, you know, so this is how democracy dies with thunderous applause, is like that's a big moment, pretty well delivered. It should feel like something really impactful. This should be the real moment where our heroes lose, not, you know, Battle of the Heroes, Duel of Fates, none of that. But it's not, because the audience has not been sufficiently convinced that the politics is anything other than pointless set dressing on the good bits. And that's the problem. Narratively speaking, all that tedious political stuff is profoundly important. It's showing how Palpatine can entrench himself and take over from, you know, just two sides of the same war. But none of that is what we tuned into Star Wars for, and none of it is communicated competently enough by the movie to convince us that it's actually relevant. This is not my genre of choice, but I have been told by people who like that sort of thing that this is the appeal of things like Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, where it's like, I want to see slow-building political intrigue. I want to see heroes fall as they have to violate their principles, you know, like the Jace plotline in Arcane, where it's just like needless political intrigue bullshit, where I'm just like, yeah, whatever, go back to the fist fights. Like, I understand I'm not the target audience for this, but I feel like there's a way to communicate that even I could understand.
Yeah, exactly. The movie does not, and the book does, is truly the fundamental difference here. So, truly, I cannot be normal about this book. There is an extended framing sequence that runs between all the chapters, because there are 3 arcs, and it begins, the first one says the dark is generous, and it has this whole meditation on how the dark is generous, and the second one is that the dark is patient, and it's always patient. Darkness always comes eventually, and then the third one is the dark always wins. And in the end, we get at the very end, it's like, oh yes, but in the darkness's power lies its great weakness, because even a single candle can hold it back, yada yada, New Hope. Okay. With such overly dramatic narration, like the dark is generous and it is patient and it always wins. Matthew Stover gets it. There is no limit mathematically or artistically to how extra, how over the top, how bombastically operatic the prequels can and should be. Because this, as he says in the introduction, this is the collapse of an entire civilization spilling out from one hero's internal darkness. It is a catastrophe that is so impossibly dramatic that only really, really, really good narration can actually spotlight that and draw it out.
Hell yeah.
In stunning prose, it is literally the better version of the story that exists in our heads. It is taken from Lucas's script and put into the best book imaginable that could have come out of this. It's the good version of Episode 3. It's just not a movie. So I like to think of it this way, that Revenge of the Sith is a disappointing film adaptation to the single greatest science fantasy book of all time.
Whoa.
And it makes a lot of sense when you think about it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does kind of feel like, oh, they completely failed to capture why those trade disputes were actually critical to the story.
Yes!
Yeah, no, legitimately. No, I think that's so interesting, because the idea of getting to write the novelization of a story that lives rent-free in my head is like dream job material for me. Like, like, oh, I get to overthink this story and make it better while also hitting the waypoints of the original script. Oh, please. Oh, no, twist my arm, why don't you? Because, like, that's just so fun. And the idea of, like, oh, yeah, we'll do the dialogue as written, but also if I add other dialogue to clarify, you know, things like that. Like, there's this, it's not quite like I'll fix it, but it's like I will expand on it. I'll take the original and I'll make it deeper. And I like it when stories do that. Asterisk. I like it when some stories do that. I've also seen it done poorly. When I was watching, not the quick sidebar, but when I was watching the Netflix live action Avatar, there were a few parts where I was like, I can feel the writers' room being like, we're going to fix the original. And there were a few parts where I was like, I can feel the writers' room being like, we can expand on this scene. We can let Zuko and Aang spend more time talking to each other in the Blue Spirit episode, because in the original, they basically don't have any conversations with each other. But now we have a golden opportunity to stick them in a situation and force them to talk to each other and talk out their issues. And I was like, cool. It's like, so they're going to really unsubtly articulate their character points. And I was like, no, that, less cool. Okay.
Yeah.
The subtlety was not a plot hole.
That's a great example of it.
The subtlety is not a plot hole. But in this case, the subtlety wasn't really there for most of the original, or certainly wasn't in the script. So just going in there and being like, the amount of power you can get just by being like, here was what this character was thinking when this scene was playing out. That can be so important. And that can be so revelatory. The thing with Dooku, like, you get a fraction of a second of him realizing all of this. And the story can just stretch that out on the page. Put it all out there. No consideration. The audience just gets through it at their own pace. Snip, the scene's over. And it's like, great, amazing. That's so powerful. And you can't do that in the movie. That's what the prose is for. And I look at something like this and I'm like, Revenge of the Sith was really the perfect movie to be given this treatment because it needed it so badly. Like, good movie, if you add too much extra depth, again, the subtlety's not a plot hole. If you take a good movie and you do this to it, it might just feel extraneous, or it might even feel bloated or padded, or like it might need to like invent new things to take up time on the page, or like, oh, did you know that when this was happening, this character was thinking about this completely unrelated thing? And it's like, I didn't, because they weren't. I think that this really highlights like the absolute best way that prose can be adapted from a movie. The ways that the different art forms are good at different things, the ways that the prose let you in the character's head, take it out of a context or a show don't tell is the rule of the day, and you get the ability to just tell your audience things, and that can be so freeing.
Yeah, it's truly astounding how well this works. I think that's a really good point, that it's not a fix-it fic. It's not trying to say, oh, the original's stupid, I'm gonna, okay, that George Lucas guy doesn't know what he's doing, I'm gonna make it work. It's like, no, he's writing from the screenplay. The skeleton of the story is there. He's just adding more depth to fill in the gaps and give it the most generous read possible and dress it up in the theming and tone that the narrative and prose can provide in a way that the movie kind of has to trust we just take on vibes, and the dialogue does not give us room to take it on vibes, so that's part of why it works so well.
Yeah, definitely.
So we found our answer, essentially. The book is the perfect version of Episode 3, as much as time and the artistic abilities of people working on this have been able to produce the platonic ideal of George Lucas's vision, and with better dialogue. But what if, now that we have like the correct answer, which is the book is the version that exists in our heads, great. What if we had some more fun? What if we went back to the roots roots of Star Wars. Not talking about the OT, I'm talking even further.
Yeah!
We are going to enter Kurosawa mode for the back portion of this presentation.
We're gonna unearth their hidden fortress, baby!
Exactly. To reimagine Star Wars by the director who inspired it in George Lucas. It is well known that Star Wars is a very classic story in the vein of Seven Samurai, Hidden Fortress, and frankly several other ones from director Kurosawa. And we can kind of play a fun little game and imagine an alternate universe Star Wars that was deeply in the lineage of this and, you know, never made the jump to color, stayed in Japanese, imagine it stayed dubbed. Put ourselves in Kurosawa mode where we get stark visuals, no intelligible dialogue, and all vibes. Because if you go to Disney Plus and you go to the language options, you can get some pretty robust different language localizations, and the Japanese dub of Revenge of the Sith is done by an all-star Japanese voice cast.
Yeah.
We were talking about this a little bit. I don't remember the exact actors, but it's kind of like a who's who of like Japanese voiceover work.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the guy who dubbed Obi-Wan also like voiced Naraku in the Japanese version of Inuyasha, and I was like, I've heard this man's voice today. So, I mean, yeah, that's often the case. People who do international dubbing, I've heard this a lot, where like dubs of shows or movies frequently have a stable of like 24 actors that are just in absolutely everything, because it's one studio that does the localizations for things. Kind of like how back in the 4Kids era, everything was being voiced by that same team of people, like all the Sonic games, all the anime dubs, anyway.
And they're all really talented voice actors, so the performances and the delivery are absolutely there in a way that they, frankly, are not in the original. So what we can do when we watch episode 3 in Kurosawa mode is turn off our brain from thinking about it and just feel it. And we can let the story that exists in our head fill itself into the gaps as we don't get the meaning of the words literally, but we get the feel, the kind of like emotional thrust of what's being said. It's the ideal way to watch Star Wars as a silent film, except it's just dubbed over with really good performances and in black and white, and we get to focus on the music. The reason I was able to kind of construct it this way is because I watched a video by CinemaSticks called "They Don't Want You to Watch Star Wars This Way, But It's Better," and it's essentially go watch Kurosawa mode is the thrust of the video.
The life hack they don't want you to know.
Yeah, I'll have it linked in the description along with some other recommended reading of where you can find all the other stuff we've talked about, but it is a really fascinating way to watch Star Wars. But we can go even one step further as we enter the Blackened Mantle, a fan edit by a few people, Darth Lunar / Grimrook, G. Matthias, and Spunito. I think that's the people who did it. The lineage of who made it is a little hard to track, but it combines all 3 prequels into a 3-hour epic, 2 hours 45, of Kurosawa-style samurai cinema. It is fascinating because it presents episode 3 as the main narrative with flashbacks to episode 1 and 2 intercut throughout as sepia tone, so that you kind of get a little bit like a visual indicator of what's past and what's present. And it doesn't just have the dub, but it rewrites all of the dialogue and subtitles to create a brand new interpretation of the story. Sometimes it's just, making a line sound a little less cheesy, but they go to some pretty great lengths to recontextualize a lot of what's going on in the story overall. So as an exercise in media reception, this is fascinating. It's not trying to be the correct version. It's not a fix-it fic. There are a lot of fix-it fics out there.
I would argue that it is, by its definition, fan fiction, but it's not necessarily fix-it.
Yeah, no, it's 100% fan fiction, but it's not a fix-it fic. It's not saying, oh, episode 3 was trash, I'm the one who's going to make it work. We're playing around. This is just the essence of having fun, imagining a Star Wars that could have been.
Everybody lives AU, 10K words, enemies to lovers.
Yeah,
much more than 10K words.
Oh, much more than that. So what does the Blackened Mantle do? Frankly, a lot, with not as much runtime as it sometimes feels like it is. It is a densely packed movie, and it is fascinating how much is going on here. The dialogue is snappier, it's more in character, there's more subtext in each line, and it allows leeway to rewrite or widely recharacterize the context of scenes while keeping the core feel and emotions the same. It'll end in the same spot on the macro scale, but also kind of scene to scene because we're dealing with footage and delivery that already exists. And in some cases, it's actually kind of funny because if, like, a character's name is said, like you hear something, 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 Yoda, something, something, something. So they're like, okay, we have to put Yoda's name in here. So it's kind of like a fun writing exercise in that regard. But it feels like watching the prequels for the first time with genuine suspense and intrigue in the exact opposite kind of dread as Clone Wars Season 7. Where with Season 7 of Clone Wars, we know exactly what's going to happen and when. With this, we know where it's going, but we are basically in the experience of the prequels are just coming out. We've seen the original trilogy. We know where this has to end up, but we don't know what it's going to take to get there.
Yeah.
So it is a Goldilocks zone of narrative leeway where they have to keep the scenes. They have to keep the performances. They can't add anything. They can cut and remove and rework and rewrite, but that's really all they can do. So it lets them skip a bunch of the George Lucas-y bullshit and get to the good stuff. So there's like the flashback of episode 2. We don't do the Camino plotline because why would we? We don't have the whole like gladiator fight because why? We don't need that.
Aww.
It skips a lot of the Lucas-y nonsense.
We don't get Padme's bare midriff. That's a crime. How
we
dare.
don't. They recut it very cleverly, so Obi-Wan is the one who's captured on Geonosis, and we only see him in the gladiator pit. They edited around the scenes where Padme and Anakin are there, so it's like the entire Jedi Order and the Army of the Republic is descending on Geonosis to get Obi-Wan.
Oh, they're like, that's our boy.
Exactly, it's very cleverly done, and that's just one example of frankly, several. I'll take you through this a little bit, give you the gist of it. We're not going to get too far into it because I think it is worth going to watch this yourself. I feel bad like going through all the effort of this detailed diatribe only to be like, okay, now like go, leave and watch it.
Now 2.5 hours of homework, baby.
Yeah, now is where we get the homework in. So let me take you on a little bit of a tour. The motivations in episode 3 are a little weird in the movie that we got. In the book, they're better characterized, but in this, the real crux of it is Anakin's premonitions about his mother and now about Padme being murdered by someone he's not sure who. And we get in flashbacks to episode 1, it's not that Qui-Gon took a sample of his blood and was like, holy f***, look at all those midi-chlorians. It's a sequence where Anakin's describing how he had a dream about a pod race crash that was going to happen, and then the next day he went to go watch the pod race, and the crash happened exactly like that, and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are like, has anyone this young had that strong a power of premonition? No? Okay, cool. Master Yoda will want to learn about this. So Anakin from a very young age is gifted and cursed with these kinds of visions, and that becomes the guiding principle of his arc of like, I see horrible things happening. I need to do something about this.
That's so funny because what that means is that they've just leaned more into the Dune influence on Star Wars that I'm sure Lucas was hoping nobody would look too closely at. Because like I saw somebody point this out where it's like, oh, that's why it's on a desert planet. Oh, that's why the Force is like that. But then it's like, oh, that's why Anakin's entire arc is like that. Oh no. Oh, precognitive chosen one who falls to the dark side and becomes a nightmarish despot. Cool, okay, yeah, I've read this book back in 1960 something.
So how they do it in this one is the main conflict, instead of the rank of master bullshit, it was stupid, they lean into the assassination plotline from episode 2 where people want Padme dead, and the way they characterize it is that there was this vote that she was basically leading to ban the sale of battle droids before the war broke out, and now the Separatists want her dead. So Padme has been in danger essentially her entire life, and now the main threat against her is the droid General Grievous. And after, doing the rescue of Palpatine and getting back on Coruscant, they're like, okay, great, Anakin and Obi-Wan, you two stay on Coruscant, protect Padme and the Chancellor. The rest of the Jedi are going to fan out across the galaxy to find Grievous. And Anakin's like, wait, I don't want to stay here. I want to be out there, like, doing stuff, because if I'm here, I'm just going to stew in my emotions, and that's bad. And the Jedi Council are like, overruled. So instead of the rank of master scene, Anakin is being caged by the Jedi, being given a task that is very important, but it's the exact opposite of what he wants to be doing, because he wants to be out there, he wants to be doing something, but he's stuck on the planet waiting for something to happen.
Hey, bro, you're being framed as though the Venetian blinds in the background are prison bars and trapping you. Is anything wrong? Need to talk about it? Or
Interestingly enough, in this sequence, Anakin's talking to Yoda, and they don't have the Jedi aren't allowed to marry thing. So, like, everyone knows Anakin and Padme are married, and that's totally fine. It's removing what is, frankly, one of the weaker sources of conflict, is like, oh, the secret love. It's like, no, like, Anakin, we know that, like, Padme's your wife. Like, that's fine. Like, you stay here and protect her. we'll go out and go kill Grievous. And Anakin's like, no!
I want to kill him myself.
Yeah. And this leads into, as we get back onto Coruscant, we start to then go pretty heavily like reverse scene of flashbacks starting from episode 1, working through episode 2. And there are, admittedly, a lot of flashbacks because we're getting most of the story from episodes 1 and 2 intercut over the plot of episode 3. And they don't just add context for the present, but they're presented almost as the characters' inner monologues in several sequences. So we hear, Anakin land on the planet and he's like premonitions about this and that, and then we cut back to the first moment when he is seen by Qui-Gon as having these powers, and then the rest of the movie is basically like reverse scene. So the past and the present are always in this conversation with each other over the course of the runtime, which is very much George Lucas. It's like poetry, it rhymes. But what we get out of this is the sense of what a character is thinking in between scenes. So towards the end of the movie, as Obi-Wan is on his way to Mustafar to go fight Anakin, this is when we get the Darth Maul fight, where it's the last time he fought a Sith Lord.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's tasty.
Yeah, we can see like Obi-Wan is on the, the space plane, whatever, on his way to Mustafar, probably playing this fight over in his head over and over and over again. And it kind of makes sense because Obi-Wan uses the same technique, the flippy thing. So he's probably like thinking about it, not just emotionally, but also like, okay, tactics. Last time I fought a Sith, Anakin doesn't have a double-bladed lightsaber, I think. Okay, cool, let's work through this. So it's a really cool way to get a window into what's going on with the characters, and it feels like we are experiencing Anakin's visions and dreams right alongside him. The flashbacks loudly ringing around inside his head. He's constantly carrying that weight with him his whole life and through the entire runtime of the film, and it is a method of editing that deepens the characterizations beyond just giving exposition. It is really, really clever, because usually when I've seen Star Wars fan edits or stuff combines the prequels into one movie, they still play out in linear order. We start with the Darth Maul fight, and then we go through episode 2, and then we go into episode 3. But this is a lot smarter than that, frankly, because it isn't just like, okay, we're gonna cut out all the crap and just get the good stuff here. It's like, okay, no, let's play with this. What can we do narratively and characterization-wise with the edit? What does this allow us to do that the original movies couldn't? And I think that shows, frankly, not just a lot of creativity, but an admirable restraint on the part of the creators who made this.
This does remind me, I don't remember where it was. I saw a video that was basically just cutting in scenes from the prequels to that bit in episode 4 where Obi-Wan's telling Luke about Anakin and is like, oh yes, he was a cunning warrior and a good friend. And it just like, by cutting them in, it added this layer of depth to the performance, which was already good because of course Alec Guinness, because he's like giving depth to it. He's got this sort of melancholic vibe, but when you see it intercut with like them fighting on Mustafar, it's like, damn, that really adds a layer of sort of like 1,000-yard stare pain to this. And it's just, again, it's when you see the character's internal narration laid out, whether that's in prose or some other context, it changes the way you read their performance. And I remember finding that extremely effective, and it sounds like they basically just applied that to the entirety of episode 3.
Exactly, and it works really, really well. So last little bit of narrative recounting before we get too far into the end of the movie. I'll let you experience that for yourself.
Ooh.
The Plagueis the Wise scene is an interesting example of how they're reworking it. It's not the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise. Palpatine's like, let me tell you about my master, Plagueis the Wise. No Darth. He's not a Sith Lord in this.
Just a dude.
Instead of trying to manipulate the midichlorians to create life, he is a scholar renowned across the galaxy who was also gifted with the power of premonition and was trying to learn how to control it so that he could see the future and avoid his death. Palpatine's secret is that he is a Sith Lord, and when he reveals this to Anakin, he's like, yeah, so the thing is, with the power of the dark side, I can see my prophecies, my futures clearly, I can act on them, and I can forestall any bad thing from happening to me, and use my powers to scheme and put myself in the most advantageous position possible, which explains why in the narrative he is such a good schemer. He has used the power of the dark side to unlock prophecy and be able to see into whatever future he wants and make that reality. So the line that's drawn for Anakin is very clear in comparison to the original version of episode 3, where it's learn the dark side, understand the future, save Padme. Crisp, clean, it makes so much more goddamn sense than it does in the original version of episode 3, where it's like, the dark side will give you the power to save the ones you love. Trust me, bro. I swear.
Source, trust me, bro.
Yeah, this makes sense for Anakin. It's like, I have these premonitions. Oh, you're telling me I can control them? Done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Easy. Solid.
Instead of having pointlessly haunting dreams, I can actually take action to save the people I love. Yeah, sign me up.
And this makes sense because Anakin wants nothing more than to protect Padme. So if there's just a little dark side as a treat, yeah, that's a perfectly believable motivation. So as Anakin is told by Mace Windu to go sit in the temple and guard it because, you know, a Sith Lord's on the loose in Palpatine's office, what are we going to do? Anakin decides to leave the Jedi Temple and get on a speeder and hop over to the Chancellor's office. And while this is happening, we get a flashback to the Dooku fight from the end of Episode 2, which is presented in a similar way to Darth Maul and Obi-Wan. Like, the last time Anakin f***ed up in a fight against a Sith Lord, he charged in and got himself screwed and he lost an arm. And that flashback ends with the sequence of Dooku and Sidious talking about what just happened. Dooku's like, Master Kenobi had a Padawan, and Sidious says, yes, I have foreseen the path that will lead him to me. And as he's saying that, usually in between flashbacks, it fades all the way to black and fades back up. In this moment, when Palpatine's saying, I've foreseen the path that will lead Anakin to me, it fades seamlessly into Anakin's ship landing at the Chancellor's office at the little hover pad as he runs in to see Mace Windu with a blade at Palpatine's throat. So it's a really clever use of just rewriting a little bit of scenes, recutting some stuff and reorganizing it to tell a fascinating story.
Yeah.
And I will not go any further than that. I'll let the rest of the story play out. It is worth watching it. I have a link in the description. But what I love about this is that it captures the experience. It is part of a long lineage of editing in Star Wars. There's a video online about how Episode 4 was saved in the edit, as Lucas had a sense of how he wanted the movie to progress, and one of his editors came in and was like, let's reorganize this. Let's tell this a little better with the magic of editing.
Yeah, so I have some notes.
Yeah, so this is part of a long lineage of important edits in Star Wars, and I give it a little more of a pass of I don't read this as trying to be a fix-it fic, because I feel like it is seeing itself as participating in a long tradition of this kind of thing. It's not trying to fix or overwrite Episode 3, but to give a viewer the experience of seeing it for the first time. You've just gone to see the original trilogy, and now you're going to see the prequels and find out how we got there. It is the Star Wars movie from an alternate universe where it never left the samurai cinema mold in 1970, whatever it was when Episode 4 came out. So that's what I love about it, is it's just different. It's not trying to overwrite Episode 3, or Episode 2 or 1 for that matter. It exists in its own little space, and it's just a fun alternate universe experience where you can get the sense of seeing this movie for the first time and viewing it in a completely different way. It doesn't diminish my enjoyment of any of the other Star Wars media. I don't think like, oh no, if only this was the one we had all along. No, it's a fan edit, and they are working with a lot of stuff that already exists and having fun with it by just doing something so radically different. That's what makes it so enjoyable.
Yeah.
So why the fixation at the end of all of this? Why Episode 3? Why are we so focused on trying to redeem it? The most logical answer is that this is the part of the story that either makes or breaks the narrative of the original trilogy, where the galaxy is in crisis either because of a true Shakespearean tragedy or because of a clown show. And we would all like to imagine that it is because of a tragedy. Unfortunately, we got the clown show.
New fan edit on my desk by Monday. I want to see Battle of the Heroes, but every time Anakin moves, it makes clown shoe squeaky noises.
Oh, no.
I can hear him all the way down the hall, baby.
It can exist in concert with the other edits we've talked about today.
When he's marching up the Jedi Temple to slaughter the younglings, and it's just squeak, 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 squeak.
Yeah.
Master Skywalker,
Perfect.
there are too many of them. Squeak, squeak, what are we going to do?
God. We want the stakes of Luke's heroism in the original trilogy to be high. We see the vision. We know what the idea was. It's so clear how this could have been the captivating drama Lucas probably wanted it to be. But of course, like Vader himself, we want to see that the origin story of the Darth is capable of redemption. Star Wars wants us to look for the good in people, and people want to look for the good in Star Wars. It's like poetry. It rhymes.
That's good. That's tasty. I like that a lot.
So ultimately, Revenge of the Sith was the chosen one. Just give it time. and a little outside help.
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting discussion to be had here because it takes a special kind of story to feel like it deserves a better version of itself. We've seen plenty of things that are just bad. One of the things that's been fascinating to me about the fallout of Rebel Moon coming out is that it does not hit this threshold. Nobody watched Rebel Moon and was like, damn, this movie deserved a better version. Like, no, that exists. It's called Star Wars.
Yeah.
But like there are like even with the sequels, people were like these characters deserved a better movie to be in, which tells me something about the writing of the characters, or at least the performances behind the characters, the passion of the actors. And you watch the prequels and you're like, yeah, these characters deserved a better movie. I think the acting is spot on, rock solid. Again, Hayden Christensen defender. If he has one fan, I am one of them. I don't think that's how that goes. But anyway, again, this is just that same thing we talked about in Rogue One. Star Wars would be so good if it was good. It takes a rare franchise to make you think that, because there are a lot of things where I'm like, this is trash, it's delicious garbage, and I like it just the way it is. And there are things where I'm like, this is bad, and I don't like that it exists. Star Wars is like, oh man, it's a diamond in the rough, baby. It's not that it can be fixed necessarily, it's the fact that it's so fucked up on so many levels that makes it endlessly fascinating, you know?
And that's probably part of why there's so much, like, hand-wringing in the fan community over, like, what was good about it, because it means something different to everybody else, and every piece of Star Wars media is a conversation mostly of the movie, and then the last, like, 20% is what you think was good about it. And everyone will see that last 20% slightly differently.
Yeah, it's different every time. Sometimes when I rewatch something, I'm like, I'm liking different parts of this than I did last time. Like that happens with everything, but it especially happens with Star Wars.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, there's the other 20% that's like different deal breakers, where it's like, oh, I'm in the wrong headspace. I cannot handle the way anybody talks in these movies.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, I can't get over how goofy some of the choreography gets when everybody's bouncing around like weightless CGI dolls or something like that. It's just, it completely depends. But in the same way that I find bad movies fascinating because they are easier to take apart than good movies, a good story will like have the intended effect on you. You know, it'll change the way you see the world. It'll put you in a weird space for the rest of the day, that kind of thing. And then, you know, you're a changed person and the story has done its part and moves on. And frequently when you rewatch it after that, it doesn't have the same impact because like it's already changed you in the way that it could change you. Something that's bad, you keep snagging on. It doesn't just like wash over you like a wave. It's just like, I got seaweed in my eye on that one. What the hell is this? Why are there so many trade disputes? And it's fascinating because it's a mix of like good, transformative, interesting ideas executed in an interesting way and garbage. Like that's what makes it such a weirdly like challenging thing to get a handle on. Because if it was just bad, like Rebel Moon, everyone would forget about it immediately. I think it's a legitimately extremely interesting example to hold up when it comes to the question of why is Revenge of the Sith such an enduring thing? Because it's not a good movie pound for pound. Like it's got good parts in it. I think that every bad movie has good parts in it. It's just how much do you like those good parts? How good are they? How much of the mass of the movie is made up of the good parts versus the trash? How bad is the trash? Like it's a balancing act. But then you get a movie that is just absolutely style over substance, that is trying so hard to be Star Wars, but does not understand what made Star Wars tick in the first place. And it's a very interesting and useful point of comparison. And then on the flip side, you can compare it to the two Dune movies that have come out. Because again, as we mentioned, Star Wars is quote-unquote subtly, deeply influenced by Dune. And you look at that, and you look at the movies that we've gotten, and we're like, these aren't trying to be Star Wars. And Star Wars wasn't really trying to capture this aesthetic either. It's clear that Lucas was like, I want this, but with human characters that actually are like interesting and fun and charismatic and know how to be human beings and aren't just Turbo Chad mega genius calculating machines with borderline psychic powers and actual psychic powers sometimes. Like Lucas was like, yeah, love the setting, love the desert planet, love that precognition stuff. Everything else out with the trash. We're going to do this hero's journey point for point. And there's an interesting conversation to be had, especially because we just spent a lot of this talking about a fan work based on episode 3, because these are all in conversation with each other. They're all drawing on different parts of each other's work. They're all saying, this works for me, let's make a whole story about that. And you have one case where it worked very well with Blackened Mantle. Is that the Mantle? Yeah, the fan cut. And then you get something that was like, I like the aesthetic of Star Wars and the fact that there are characters in it. And that's how you get Rebel Moon Part 1 and Part 2, baby.
Yeah. And the difference between episode 3 and Rebel Moon is that like we see the good version of episode 3. There is no good version of Rebel Moon that exists in our heads. There's just nothing nothing there.
And that's what Revenge of the Sith does. It gives you something to care about. It gets you just invested enough in the characters that you're like, God, I wish your writing was better. You deserve it. And it's like, what a nonsensical concept on paper. To look at a fictional character and say, you deserve better than the story I found you in. How does that even happen? But Star Wars keeps pulling it off in every movie.
That really is it, is that Star Wars Episode 3 deserved better, and with a lot of time, it got the better that it deserved. The movie did not miraculously become better, but the story of the fall of the Republic and the death of the Jedi got something better. That got what it deserved, even if Revenge of the Sith, the box of that film specifically, will always be what it was.
And we've had the novelization since 2005 is basically when the movie came out.
The novelization came out, I want to say, a month before the film did.
Oh no. So people who read it were given standards. Could you imagine being one of those people who got it fresh off the shelves before the movie came out and was like, wow, this is incredible. I can't wait to see them do it justice.
But then you got maybe the best experience of all, where it's like, ah yes, this is a middling adaptation of the best science fantasy book ever written.
Yeah, you know what?
Where they got that in first, so that's lodged in there before anything else.
Damn, yeah.
People who had that experience, I am begging you to let us know in the comments.
God, I hope that the Venn diagram overlaps with our audience. I'm so curious what that must have been like.
My episode 3 experience is that my school had a field trip that day.
Ooh.
And I didn't want to go, so I dressed up in an Anakin costume and went to the local theater and watched episode 3 as like a little 10-year-old bean, or however old I would have been. And it was amazing. I was like my little Anakin guy with a little lightsaber, and all these like college-age kids were like, oh my god, there's a tiny child dressed up as Anakin. It was great. I was the champion of the lobby on that theater that day.
You won that day at the theater.
Skipped school to go see episode 3. Fucking champion. Only day I missed all year.
Oh, wow. And honestly, like, I feel like the prequels are best experienced when you are 10 years old, you know?
Yeah.
Like, because the first one's boring. But then, oh my god, the Darth Maul fight is so exciting! Wah! And then the second one is, it's all right. But then, oh my gosh, the gladiator fight with the big monsters, and then the million Jedi show up, and they all go pew pew pew. And then the third one is like, oh, it's a cool fight, and it's making me feel feelings at the same time when you get Battle of the Heroes, and it's like, whoa! It's only when we come in with our fucking adult brains and start overthinking it, and we're like, wait, hold on, this writing is bad though. Like, why though? Why is it like that? And then we're like, this could be better if, you know, it could still appeal to the little 10-year-old me that lives in my head.
That is a vocal position I've seen on the internet.
Yeah.
You don't actually think the prequels are better than like modern Disney Star Wars. You just miss being 10 years old. And to a degree, like, yeah.
I mean, read for filth. Like, you didn't need to come for them like that.
Like, bad media from when you were young has a special place in everyone's heart. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Again, like I said, sometimes you experience a story and it profoundly changes you. And then you go back and you're like, this doesn't feel the same. And it's like, it already profoundly changed you. It worked. The Star Wars movies are so fascinating, and it's fun that we're like basically back-to-backing 2 detailed diatribes about it, because it's rent-free, man. You can't experience Star Wars and go fully unchanged. Because it's really buckshot of a story. Something will hit you. Somebody will be like, that's cool. One of the alien designs, some of the immersion, just the core concepts. There's always something.
2003 Clone Wars.
yeah, exactly. Just the Genndy version where nobody talks. It's great. It slaps. And I think that's part of why anytime a new Star Wars thing comes out and there's just like a sudden uprush of criticism, it just like never even registers in my brain as significant, because Star Wars has always been doing this. They're just throwing stuff at the wall, and it's not that they're seeing what sticks. Everything that they do sticks with somebody. There's someone who's like, Mandalorian season 2 is my absolute favorite, and is like, cool, I can't relate. I like Mandalorian season 1 because I like Lone Wolf and Cub, and that's just what that is. And there are some people for whom it's like, yeah, I like that they actually tried to tell a complicated story about trade disputes and the political underpinnings of what looks like a simple hero's journey. Hell yeah, great. It's so weird. It's such a weird combination of kind of like widespread incompetence and like managing to nail it enough times that people just really like what they like from it. And the people who are content with the parts of Star Wars they like are the most at peace Zen people I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
They're the people who don't jump on Twitter to be like, I am be uncomfortable when we are not about me, when Star Wars puts out something new that they don't like. They're like, yeah, 90% of Star Wars is what I don't like about Star Wars, but the 10% ain't going anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Episode 3 is fucking good, man.
Okay, well, let's not get crazy about here.
No, hold on.
Okay.
I'm on to something here.
Wait,
Not because it's a good movie, but because there is so much joy that came out of it for so many people. Whether it was the other shows, the other movies, the memes, even at the lowest common denominator of the memes, those have brought so much joy to so many people that it's not like that alone is worth it. Like George was slaving away at ILM so that we could have our prequel memes. No. But like there is so much joy that came out of this movie, and I want to make this detailed diatribe not to be like, episode 3 is like actually fantastic and you're all like too dumb to realize it, but like to see the joy that came from this.
No, you save that hot take for Spider-Man 3. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, that's my Spider-Man hot take. Look at me defending maligned third entries in movies series.
Humbug. But no, yeah, I think that the communal joy that came out of this series can't be understated. Can't be overstated. Which is the good one. Can't be overstated. Can be understated.
Yes, frequently understated. But that's all we've got for us today. So until we find another Star Wars related thing to talk about, bye!